You know, as Doug mentioned, I was honored to be, I was honored to serve as the executive director of PUMP for nearly 7 years. And in that capacity, we did a lot of work to really civically engage young people in our city and in our county. And that was, you know, some of the most important work that helped me, perpetuated me to run for public office. You know, we have a saying in politics, and that is, if you're not at the table, you're probably on the menu. And this rings true on so many levels. I think when we talk about diversity, representation, true representation of our community here, the representation we have in Harrisburg is absolutely not reflective of the population here in Allegheny County and frankly in the state of Pennsylvania. So all of this kind of ties in and really stems from the work that we did at PUMP and really kind of inspired me to get more involved in government. And, you know, I want to talk briefly about some of the work we did at PUMP around transportation, and then I want to address something interesting I found in this report kind of following that, on the heels of that, regarding government. And you know, when I was at PUMP, I mentioned civic engagement was a huge part of what we did. We tried to connect young people to issues facing the region. We gave them a voice. We educated young people about different issues. So when we would get calls and emails from our members saying, you know, I'm really concerned about losing my bus. I needed to get to work. I live in a neighborhood that has public transit. I use the public transit. You know, PUMP would step up to the plate and we would host a discussion with local leadership around issues facing public transit cuts and transportation. You know, in the beginning of my tenure, we had just come off a trip to Harrisburg and a trip to DC with PUMP members who knocked on the doors of our legislators and our elected officials saying, you need to come up with a sustainable funding source for public transportation because our city's not going to live. Our city will slowly die. Young people move out of our city. So we did a lot of advocacy around issues like that. Young people did play a very big role in that. And you know, for years at PUMP, our transportation committee said, you know, young people want to live. This is a blanket statement, I'm going to say it, but I do have backup now that this report came out. Young people want to be and want to live in cities that have reliable and affordable public transportation. Been saying it for years. Always believed it. The feedback we got from our members at PUMP was very clear that that's what they wanted, that's what they wanted to be. And you know, I was glad that when I read through the report, I saw that young adults are much more likely than any other age group to frequently use public transportation. So given that statement and given the validation by your report, which I appreciate, you know, I can draw a few different conclusions from that. When I head to Harrisburg, I think it's going to be very important and very critical that the state of Pennsylvania really focus on sustainable public transit systems in our major urban centers, but also making sure our roads, bridges, and highways are not structurally deficient and not crumbling. You know, public transit is one piece of the puzzle. Some of the things that have come up in the last, I'd say, year, and specifically during my election, have been conversations that I've had with voters, with young people about a comprehensive statewide sustainable funding source for transportation as a whole. This is reflected in the governor's TFAC report, which stands for Transportation Funding Advisory Commission report. This is sitting in Harrisburg, just waiting for conversations. It's waiting to be vetted. It's really critical that we jump on this as soon as possible. This is our infrastructure. So one of the things I found in the report that I want to pull out that's also really interesting, it says that a majority of young adults advocate spending more on roads and bridges, schools, and on job creation and economic development in the region. I'm one of them, and I got elected, so that's good news. The platform I ran on was primarily focused on getting this transportation question answered, getting this TFAC vetted, making sure that our infrastructure is strong so that Pennsylvania remains competitive. We remain a state that attracts young people to our urban centers. We really need to correct this problem at the state level. And after knocking on about 5,000 doors, it turns out that this issue of transportation goes beyond young people. It is something that is widely supported across several sectors. The business community supports public transit and transportation infrastructure improvements at the state level. The nonprofit community, you know, we move a lot of our folks around in the social service sector through public transportation. Young people, of course, as I originally mentioned, want to live in vibrant cities that have affordable and reliable public transit. So I can't think of a more important and timely issue to head to Harrisburg to discuss and get solved than transportation. Moving out of this transportation question for just a minute, something I noticed in the report is, you know, here on one of the pages, it says that several young adults, particularly those in positions of leadership, felt that there are ample opportunities for them to initiate change in southwestern Pennsylvania, perhaps more than in larger metropolitan regions. Now, I completely agree with this. I think that when it comes to our government being very accessible to everyone, especially young people, it is. I think that stepping up and saying, I want to make a difference, like Scott or Julie, you know, is very much embraced in the city of Pittsburgh. I think it's something that's welcomed. But I was disheartened to see on the page before that, it says, young adults have the lowest rate of voter participation of any age group. In fact, 1 in 4 report they never vote, even in presidential elections. So here we have this really excited and engaged young adult population that thinks that Pittsburgh is a great place to create positive change, and it's accessible, yet we're not participating in probably one of the best ways to create change. And I think that's something that we need to work on. I think it's a real opportunity for our, you know, local organizations like PUMP, our local elected officials, frankly, to kind of change that scenario. The things that I mentioned, all the transportation planning and all the exciting projects that we can have to grow our economy, to make us more competitive, to improve our infrastructure, are not possible if the people we elect aren't focusing on it. So I think that when I look at this report, there are so many amazing things and there's so much optimism in here and so much proof that young people want to see vibrant communities that have arts in their education programming, solid infrastructure, yet the folks we elect are not focusing on these things. So what I am going to challenge everybody here to do is take this report and think about, you know, upcoming elections, future elections, you know, how do we get folks that subscribe to what's in this report in positions of leadership in government to start talking about it? I think it's really, really critical, and that's kind of something that wasn't really touched upon. And I mean, I'm happy to do it, but you know, 1 is the loneliest number. So please think about it. Think about how we can translate this into government, into leadership, and start talking about these things. You know, 5,000 doors don't lie. People are mad when you say your bus stop is going away. You know, I can maybe think of 5 doors I knocked on where people were really concerned about liquor privatization. But they really are pissed when you take away their bus stop. They can't get to work, they can't get to their doctor, they can't stay in their homes. You know, there's just so many things that transportation can do for our communities. And we need to start to look at people who believe that as well.